Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Sasha Chilkova, Marketing Manager here at Witham. Today we'll be talking about Power Platform and licensing. We'll untangle some confusion around that and talk about all the different capabilities and the tools in the Power Platform. Really quickly, just a few housekeeping items. We are recording the webinar today. We'll provide a link to the recording and a link to the slide deck later this afternoon. We'll try to keep the session to about 45 to 50 minutes, and we'll leave plenty of time for questions. Please don't hold back your questions throughout the session. We'll address them at the end, and maybe if there's some that pop up, we'll pick them out as we go through the session, but you can submit your questions in the questions pane of the GoToWebinar control panel. And I think that's about it. And with me today, of course, is Daniel from Witham, and then we have a special guest from Microsoft, April Dunham. So Daniel and April, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. My name is Daniel Cohen-Dumani. I'm a partner here at Witham Digital. Witham Digital is a Microsoft consultancy. We provide consulting services around the Microsoft Cloud, and I'm super excited here today to bring some experience and insight about the Power Platform and specifically how to license. A little bit of a background about myself. I've been in the technology space as long as I can remember. I bring more than 25 years of digital transformation expertise. Started my consulting career with Microsoft SharePoint, and now spend Office 365 in the entire Microsoft Cloud. I've always been very interested about the productivity in the modern workplace, and for some people, we call that the new normal, Work 2.0. And an interesting fact, I started working with SharePoint when nobody could even spell the word, and I think that's common for you, April. And I'm super excited to introduce April, who's with Microsoft, and we've known each other for a couple of years. So April, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. So, hey everyone, my name's April Dunham. I'm a partner technical architect here at Microsoft on the One Commercial Partner team. I've been here for just a little bit over a year now. So kind of like Daniel, before joining Microsoft, I did start my career off in the SharePoint space as well. I was a SharePoint developer for many years, and kind of doing the consulting stuff. So, very interested in, development and the business apps space also. So did a lot of InfoPath and SharePoint Designer in my day. And of course, naturally transitioned to the Power Platform and was a Power Platform MVP before joining, and did a lot of that, in the community space and a lot of stuff with Power Platform. So happy to be here. Obviously, one of the most common questions and topics we get asked is about licensing. So hopefully we can kind of clear some of that up today.
Excellent. Thank you, April, again for joining us. So what to expect from today's webinar? One is to understand the fundamentals of the Power Platform. This is a platform that Microsoft has launched many years ago, include a lot of great capability. So we want to introduce you to that platform so you have a good understanding of what the Power Platform can do for your business. And then next, we'll talk about understanding how the Power Platform licensing works. It's complicated, and we're going to try to untangle that for you with some clear example of the capabilities and how to license them. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. If you have questions throughout the webinar, post them in the question window. We'll address those either at the end or throughout the webinar as well. So first, let's start with a few polls. Number one is, are you currently using the Power Platform? So yes, no, or considering it. We're seeing response here. The majority of you are either yes, using the Power Platform, and considering it. And for some of you that are not using it, I think that understanding licensing before you use it is extremely important as well. So that was the first poll. The next one is, if you use the Power Platform, which capability? And you have multiple choices here to use PowerApps, Power Automate, Power BI, Power Virtual Agent, the common data services, or all of the above. Interesting, a few of you are already using Virtual Agent. So that's exciting to see. Most of you are considering or using PowerApps, Power Automate, of course, and PowerBI. That's phenomenal. All right, so let's move on. Let's start with an introduction to the Power Platform. And some of you may have seen that slide. The Power Platform is the Microsoft low-code, no-code platform that span Office 365, Azure, Dynamics, and a few standalone applications. It is meant to bring innovation anywhere, to unlock new business processes, to allow you to create application with low code or no code. This is a trend that obviously we hear in the industry of a move to coding application, to having platforms that allows you to do that virtually without being a developer. Microsoft introduced the concept of citizen developer, which means that any of us that are non-developers, I used to develop 20 years ago, but not anymore. All of us non-developers should be able to build apps, connect those apps with backend system, create virtual agents, or visualize that data using the Power BI platform. As part of the Power Platform, there's plenty of data connectors, probably about 175. The list is growing every day. Those data connectors implement connection to backend systems. Some are cloud systems, some are on-premises systems. So that's a powerful way to connect your application to virtually any system. And if you don't have a built-in connector, you can create your own custom connector, obviously. Part of the Power Platform is the AI Builder, which is a way to infuse artificial intelligence into your application, into your processes, into your front-end apps, into your data visualization app, and of course, your virtual agents. And lastly, a foundational item of the Power Platform is what Microsoft just rebranded as Dataverse. Dataverse used to be called the Common Data Services. And for those of you that have built a database, we'll talk about what Dataverse is. Simply a database in the cloud with great, powerful features so that you don't need a lot of infrastructure and people to maintain this database behind the scene. So why now? What this trend to move and modernize in the cloud, right? So for many organizations, it's a mean to reduce cost, right? You have maybe aging data center, a need to spend capacity. You want to improve performances. Maybe you have some business application that are coming to an end of life, right? Maybe security is what's driving this modernization. For many business, it's about increasing agility, right? Being able to create an application very quickly, maybe use it for 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, but without the overhead of going through a complete software development lifecycle. And also accelerating innovation. Gartner said that by 2022, there's a cloud shift spending that continued to increase 28%. The modern application developer opportunity, which is really what the Power Platform is all about, will continue to grow at a rapid pace. It's expected that more than 500 million new applications will be built in the next 5 years. This is more, if you think about this, staggering, more than all apps built in the last 40 years, right? So we see an acceleration of building application rapidly. Many of those apps should be mobile. And if you are one of those organizations, we know that many of our clients, prospective clients, are telling us, I have a backlog of things I'm supposed to build, right? And traditionally, using traditional approach, it takes way too long. So, with that, and you add the fact that most organizations still are using paper to manage critical business process, you understand sort of the opportunity. So tremendous amount of opportunity from a market standpoint, continue to see a 20% annual growth of just application modernization over the next few years. So with that, I'm gonna talk, and April and I are gonna talk about the specific of each of the component of the Power Platform. And April, tell us about PowerApps. I know that that's one of your recent expertise, and you've been publishing tremendous amount of videos about PowerApps and how to use it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, definitely love Power Apps. So you just talked about that app gap that we have and the 500 million new apps that are going to need to be built in the next several years. Well, the solution to that could be Microsoft Power Apps within the Power Platform. And I see from the poll that we just did that a lot of you are using this that are using the Power Platform. So that's great. One of the things I love about Power Apps is just it's a rapid application development tool. So it's going to allow us to build applications that span both the desktop, your tablet, and your mobile. You code that once, it works on all of those different platforms. It works on iOS, it works on Android. And you have to build it once with low code tools, drag and drop interface, Excel type expressions, and you can do things like extending the Microsoft 365 platform. So if you want to use this to customize your SharePoint list, this is the tool for that. You can use it to extend Dynamics 365. And it's also a great tool for connecting to your legacy and third-party apps. Daniel mentioned earlier these things that we have called connectors. With our connector model, we're enabled to connect to over 415 different SaaS services right now. And we can do things like he mentioned, creating custom connectors and using something called the data gateway to connect to on-prem data. So that makes Power Apps a great choice to extend and connect your legacy and third-party applications with the tool. It's also really great for building these departmental solutions. And that's oftentimes where we see people kind of starting with Power Apps. You might have a really specific IT type, maybe like little project management or server management application, whatever it might be, really one-off departmental type solution. Power Apps is a great fit for that also. And even your end-to-end mission critical solutions, you can leverage the power of that Dataverse database that Daniel mentioned to create holistic end-to-end mission critical solutions, all within Power Apps and the Power Platform. And so all of this, kind of building on, so Power Apps just being one subset of the Power Platform, it's even more powerful if you're using it in tandem with some of these other Power Platform applications. So being able to build your standalone apps and connecting those even to Azure. So one of the great things about Power Apps and the Power Platform as a whole is this kind of what we're branding as the Fusion Developer Story. So while these are great tools for people that don't have traditional development skills, so they can use, kind of a familiar drag and drop interface to create these solutions, we have these extensibility points also that allows pro developers to come in and extend the platform, whether it's with some Azure services, maybe cognitive services or Azure functions, whatever it might be. We can really extend this out and create so many different solutions with this, with a combination of different skills. And it comes really powerful with Power Automate also, extending that so you can have your application and your front end with Power Apps, but have Power Automate help you with the business process side of things.
And it's been interesting to see a shift both from a messaging from Microsoft to how developers have reacted to the use of Power Apps and Power Automate. I think we can tell you that 2-3 years ago, our developer here at Rhythm Digital were very skeptical. They used to write code. And I think we've seen them embrace for some use cases the use of the Power Apps platform, but more importantly, that hybrid fusion model, where you still can use Azure to build some APIs and then surface those API into Power Apps so that low-end citizen, business analysts like developer can still consume complex data that developer have exposed to another backend as well. So it's been very interesting to see that messaging change as well.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, so Power Automate, let's talk about that some more, because I said Power Automate is a great way to extend your Power Apps that you're building. So what exactly can we do with this Power Automate tool? Well, it's our workflow automation piece of the Power Platform. So with this one tool, we're enabled to create different workflow extensions, obviously within Microsoft 365 and Dynamics, but all of those connectors as well. So we can have a Power App that calls, say, a flow in Power Automate that goes and queries information information from Salesforce or whatever it might be, whatever those connect, or maybe your on-prem information, and you can have scheduled flows that run on a automated basis, maybe daily, to go pull information. And we even have the different AI capabilities that we can leverage with AI Builder, which Daniel mentioned earlier, where we can do things like sentiment analysis. Maybe you have a flow that goes and gets all of the tweets on Twitter and sees if you're getting any bad reviews on there. There's so many things that we can do with this one tool as far as automating our processes and using all of the stuff that Power Platform itself offers with AI Builder and the underlying Dataverse database. So the integration that we can do with this is really seamless and easy, very drag and drop, point and click interface again. I don't know if you've used Logic Apps at all, anyone on the webinar today, but this is kind of a subset of Logic Apps, just more user friendly. So again, another great way that we can extend that as well and do some more advanced functionality from the Pro Dev story also.
That's great. Yeah, and then we've seen that many of you on this call are using Power Automate as a workflow engine, I'm sure, and for other capabilities too. So next part of the Power Platform is Power BI, and Power BI is still using the same concept of low code, no code. In this case, for data visualization, right? So you can use Power BI, start with a desktop tool where you model your data, you connect your data to backend system. Again, using this power of those connectors, creating your own connector as needed, create those visualization, those dashboards, and then publish them in the cloud through the Power BI service that can now retrieve data again from on-premise or cloud system and present this into a uniform user interface that you publish in Teams or website or tablet or phone, or even embed in your Power Apps too, or other system as well. So that's the Power BI platform. Another component of the platform is Dataverse. And Dataverse used to be called the Common Data Services. And I have to be frank, the first time I heard about this 3 years ago, I was confused. What was the Common Data Services? And once you understand that CDS is nothing else than a cloud database, it's a place to store data in custom tables or standardized table. So the Dataverse, when you provision a database, will come with built-in entity, accounts, contacts, opportunity, notes, things that you traditionally find in a CRM system, right? Common data, does the word common data services, right? And then you can enhance and add more tables, enrich metadata. Dataverse also has a very complex and powerful security model, role-based security, ability to secure content in a way that's usually difficult to do in a traditional SQL database. And then on top of that, on top of Dataverse, you can build application in PowerApps or even your custom apps if you wanted to, and automate workflow against data stored in Dataverse, and create and enforce consistency on your data by embedding business rules and validation at the database level. So again, modern database capability inside the Office 365 platform. And for those of you that know, Dataverse is nothing else than what Dynamics has been built on. Dynamics customer engagement and field service is built on the Dataverse database. So when you are using Dynamics sales or field service or customer service, you are essentially using Dataverse as your database. Other component that the platform brings is Virtual Agent and AI Builder. I've seen a few of you are using the Virtual Agent. This is a no-code platform to build virtual agent chatbots and embed those into your application, maybe on your SharePoint side, inside Teams, and other places as well. AI Builder is a tool to build and infuse artificial intelligence into your flow. For instance, April mentioned sentiment analysis, but maybe you can use AI Builder to do forms processing, invoice processing, to read business card. And you can easily build an app that take a picture of a business card, send it to AI Builder, read the data, and send that data back to Dataverse as a database. Virtually in 2 hours, you build an app that can business card and provide, that and ingest data as well. So very powerful capability. All right, so now let's talk about the complex part of this whole Power Platform. I think we're all excited, but when it comes to licensing, it gets complicated. Microsoft has published a licensing guide. It is about 19 pages. So it's long, it's complex, and what we're going to try to do today, hopefully, if we succeed, is to untangle and give you some insight about licensing. So let's start first, because when we talk to clients, what we hear a lot is, I'm using Office 365, therefore I have all the Power Platform at my disposal. The short answer is not true. However, you get some capability, and Microsoft in their licensing guide use a term called seeded. Seeded means that it's included. So with Office 365, you get the Power Apps use right, the right to use Power Apps, including the ability to create Canvas application. Canvas is one of the model or one of the user interface that comes with Power Apps with standard or what's called free connectors. So Microsoft has 200 connectors. Of those, probably 80 are called standard connectors. So if you have a simple application that talks to a SharePoint list and you want to put that in a Canvas, you can use it. It's included in Office 365. The same story is true for Power Automate. You have a use right seeded capability to execute flow. There's a daily API limit that's important to know, which means that it's not as many flows as you want, right? You're going to be constrained. And you can also leverage standard free connectors, right? One thing to know is the licensing model changed twice over the last 3 years. A couple things happened. Some connectors became premium. They used to be standard. Think about the SQL connector, the Azure connectors, the Dynamics connector. All those connectors became premium connectors about 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago. The second thing that happened is earlier in 2020, there was yet another change into what other connector will move, and the packaging of licensing changed as well. So if you thought you knew licensing 2 years ago, it changed twice. Now, Dataverse is also part of the platform. Microsoft announced last summer a new concept. It used to be called Project Oakdale, and now called Dataverse for Teams. And essentially what Dataverse for Teams is, it is a scaled down version of the common data services, and it's used to build rich applications that run inside the Microsoft Teams platform. There are size and constraint limits to be aware. Okay, I'm not going to go in too much detail. You'll see that. We have a blog post that talks about the constraints, and obviously Microsoft has the list. But give and take, it's I think 2 GB of database you get, or 1 GB or so, with 2-3 million records per table. So for a small application, you can leverage the common data services, build rapidly application, deploy them in Teams. And I think what's exciting about that is you can deploy them in Teams desktop, but also in Teams mobile. So think about a frontline worker application that you deploy for Teams that people can use and collaborate with you internally. You also get, as part of this Project Oakdale, the Power Virtual Agent for Teams. Again, a scaled down version of Power Virtual Agent that can only run inside the Microsoft Teams client, which, by the way, is probably the best place to put a virtual agent. It really is nice to put that in Teams. And then, April, you mentioned the ability to customize SharePoint Microsoft lists using Power Apps, right? I think that's a very common scenario that many of you probably on this call have been exploring. No more info path, right, to modify a list. You now can take a SharePoint list and create, simple to medium complex application on SharePoint list using the Power Apps toolset. That again is included in Office 365. And then lastly, Power BI. Many of our clients come and say, hey, I've got Office 365, let's work on Power BI. The reality is Power BI Professional, which is really the version you need to share reports, right, is only available if you have Microsoft Office 365 E5 or Microsoft 365 E5, one of the two, right? So if you're on E5, you'll get Power BI, otherwise it is by itself. So next is Power BI licensing. So I like to start with this because that's probably the most seamless, easier way to understand licensing. Power BI is pretty streamlined and it's simple. It comes in 3 editions. Number 1 is the free edition. Yes, there is a free edition of Power BI, but it's limited for you to use it yourself. So you can create a Power BI desktop app or dashboards, use it by yourself, publish it to the web for you, and that's good, right? And you can also embed it in Dataverse for Team, right? So that's the free version, very limited, right? In most cases, if you've done and built a great dashboard, you want to share it with other people, right? That's the purpose of building dashboards. So that's where the professional version comes to play. And Power BI Professional is very streamlined and straightforward. As I mentioned, it's included in Office 365 E5, but it gives you, among other things, the ability to share reports within your organization through the Power BI service and embed those into any application. It's important to know that Power BI Professional have capacity limits, and those are not hard to distinguish, right? But it's not a limited capacity. You have a size capacity, you have a compute capacity that comes with the Power BI Professional. Again, license per user. And then Microsoft introduced later on the Power BI Premium. There's also an embed version. I'm not going to talk about this, that has very specific use case, but the premium version is used for 2 cases. One for organizations that have a lot of users, right? 10,000, 50,000 users, where obviously you can imagine licensing Power BI at $10 per user per month for a large organization may be cost prohibitive. And that's where the premium model comes to play. The premium model is based on capacity, right? And the starting point is at $4,900 per month. Those are retail pricing, of course. Your organization may qualify for a better discount. And it's great for organizations that either have a lot of users or have very large reporting needs, a need for extended capacity and storage, and some dedicated compute capacity. What that means is Microsoft dedicate power and compute to running your report. If you have a large report or a large user base, you're going to need that. And frankly, if you think about the math, if you have more than 500 users, you should consider Power BI Premium. Power Apps licensing, oh my, this one's going to give us a headache. Yep. It's changed many times, right? And I think, yes, people have been upset, and we've seen a lot of upset clients over the years that embraced Power Apps 3 years ago and have a lot of, capability included in that change, right? And it's more complicated than ever, right? So to understand licensing, let's understand the Power Apps user interface. There's something we talk about Canvas, right? And Canvas means a free form. And if you want to know how to build Canvas, go see April's video, because you're going to learn everything here, right? I watched them, April. I think they're a great introduction. You understand the power and how easy it is to do things. And when it's hard, then you'll find a video on how to make it easier, right? So free form application, put everything you want wherever you want. Next is the model-driven apps. And for those of you that know Dynamics, this is how Dynamics looks like. So think about a more transactional-based user interface. Instead of being driven by the user experience, it's driven by the data, right? So a model-driven apps is more restricted. You don't have freeform. You can only have certain layouts and components. Of course, with both, you can build your own components now. And again, if you're familiar with Dynamics, you know how model-driven apps look like. And then lastly, there's a new component called the PowerApps portal. And that addresses a specific use case. The portal is externally facing functionality. For those of you that have used SharePoint in the past, this was SharePoint extranet, right? A PowerApps portal is a place to create extranet application that are used using the Dataverse database. And think about community portal, customer portal, vendor portal. They can be anonymous, or they can be with logged in user. You can invite people to use different way to log in, LinkedIn, Facebook, and things like that. And it's more like a web content management, right? And it's easy to customize, although probably require more code than the other two, right? Again, it used to be called the Dynamics portal, but now been rebranded PowerApps portal as well. So when do you need more? You need to go back to licensing PowerApps. And there's two ways to license PowerApps. The first one is on a per app plan. Now, this is a confusing word. It is per apps plan, but don't be fooled, right? It's still licensed per user. What the per app plan tells you is you only have a few apps, maybe one or two. Maybe your user will only use one or two apps. Actually, the limit is two. You know, a subset of your user will only use certain apps, right? So with a PowerApps per app plan, you are limited to 2 apps per user, and the cost is $10 per user per plan per month. And that includes up to 2 individual apps. So a great way to get started, you get access to Dataverse CDS as a data source with what's called a basic capacity being size and storage, right? So if you have an example of a request, purchase request system that you want to use with Dataverse as a database, and that's the only app that you're going to publish initially, great way to start, right? Now it's $10 per user per month to deploy it. Of course, if you have 20,000 users, that becomes a bit expensive, and that's good to know. But the cost of this app to maintain may be a lot lower than you will otherwise. Now, if you need more, you can have the PowerApps per user plan, which allow unlimited number of apps, still licensed on a per user per month. It enables the right to use Dataverse as a data source with a larger capacity, more space, and it is $40 per user per month. Those plans used to be called P1, P2. They now changed their name, and what's included changed as well. And lastly, the PowerApps portal. So once you've licensed PowerApps per app or per user, you get automatically the right to create a portal. That's not known yet, right? Now you get a portal. The portal has 2 ways to be licensed, per login or per page view. And it depends what your portal is. If it's a portal that's mostly anonymous, where you publish a knowledge base, where people don't necessarily log in, then you're licensed on a page view basis. If you have a portal where people will log in, like a customer portal, you will license on a per login. Again, each of those plans above gets you capacity to build a portal. If you need more capacity, you'll add on capacity. Of course, there's a link embedded here where you can see more about that as well.
And before we move on, Daniel, let me interject. There's a good question in the chat here. So on that PowerApps per app plan, can we make model-driven, like 2 model-driven applications with that, or is it limited to, say, 2 Canvas apps?
Great question. No, you can do model-driven. And that's what's really new and exciting with this change that Microsoft did. Yes, people were upset, but we told them now you have a new capability. You couldn't do model-driven apps before. Now you're able to do at a reduced cost, build nice looking transactional app that looks like Dynamics, and virtually you could build a small CRM system using the model-driven app. If all you want to do is track account, contacts, and opportunity, you don't need to license the full dynamics. Too much capability, and you can build your own using Dataverse on the per app plan as well. It's a great question. Like PowerApps, Power Automate can be extended to add more capacity. There's two models, and that gets confusing. A per user licensing. This is $15 per user per month, and this allows a user to create a limited flow using any connectors. Now, where it gets confusing, April, and I never had a great answer to that question is, what if you have a SharePoint list that is used by 100 people, and you build a flow using that use premium connector? Does the 100 people needs to be licensed for the per user licensing? I think the answer is yes, right?
Yeah. So if anyone interacting with that flow will need the appropriate licensing if it's doing some premium functionality.
Right. Yeah. One thing to know is that is not being enforced yet, right? So, as of now, the person making the flow has to be licensed, but there's no enforcement of the people doing it. But it's coming. Microsoft is turning enforcement little by little. So if you're in that case where you have a flow with premium that is used by a lot of people, once enforcement comes to play, you have to be ready to license this. The good news is you can license Power Automate on a flow basis. And you know what? It's not in this slide. It's coming next. Sorry. The Power Automate per flow plan, right? Which means, let's say you have 1,000 users using a SharePoint list, and that SharePoint list trigger a Power Automate flow that is using premium connector. The good news is you can buy a per flow plan. It's only $100 per flow, but there's a minimum purchase of 5. So you start at 5, and then it's $100 incrementally after that. There's also something known as the Power Automate per user with attended RPA. I think we briefly mentioned Microsoft made some acquisition in the robotic process automation. You can create what's called a UI flow. In a very few minutes, a UI flow is a flow that actually is recording steps on a desktop of a web application. So when you don't have a connector or an API to a system, you may have a green screen system, and you want to automate that with a UI flow and the new Power Automate desktop capability. You're able to create very exciting things. And the cost for the Power Automate per user with attended RPA, which means that a user is actually logged into the system, is $40 per user per month. There's also other Power Automate unattended RPA. I'm not going to confuse everyone here, but that's a good start. So again, Power Automate per user licensing or per flow licensing is sort of the big change that came last summer as well.
We have some more questions. I don't know if we want to pause and answer because there's a few good ones. So going back to the Power App stuff briefly, someone asked, how do you define what an application is in terms of this licensing? They're asking if they can build one app that links out to multiple canvases.
An app, a Power Apps canvas can have multiple canvas or screens, right? So as long as you package it as one app, then it's all packaged under one app. It's going to Power Apps and create an app. That's what counts as an app. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if in that question you are meaning like you're going to use the launch function to go open up a totally separate Power App. In that case, you would need those licensed. It wouldn't be included. But yeah, if you're creating one big Power App to do a bunch of things, then that is included in the one license. And then along those same lines, there was a question, well, what if happens if I break licensing? Like what if I build an app, with multiple different apps and join it like that? What will be done if I break the license?
That's a great question. So the per app and per user plan is, it's interesting the way it's being licensed or deployed, right? It's not that you give it to your user. you give a pool of license to your tenant, and as people get in using that app, it takes a license away, right? And then you can remove and you can take a license away. But at some point, you're going to run out of license, right? So the system automatically grab a license as needed. You don't have to individually go person by person to license that. So you want to make sure you have enough license to support your use cases. And then you can put pools for a certain amount of people, a certain group of people, right? So it's a bit different. And there's a great article, and we'll post that as well on Microsoft on how you allocate those licenses.
We just have one more. This is actually a Power Automate question, since that's what we're on right now. How does Power Automate per flow plan get evaluated? For example, how does this limit users to only create limited flows and share with large users?
I think the same way. I think
Yep.
a per flow gets assigned to a specific flow. And once it's assigned, it can be revoked, right? But as long as it's assigned, it's being licensed as well.
Yep.
All right, so now the good news, if you use Power Automate and Power Apps together, which most applications will require both, right? It's unlikely you build a canvas that doesn't need an automate, or model-driven that doesn't need some level of automation. So if you have apps that's built on Power Apps, you automatically inherit the right to use Power Automate Premium or Premium Advanced licenses. And the caveat is as long as the flow is executed in the context of the application. Now, please don't ask me what that means, because, you know, it can be interpreted different ways. The context means that it's being called by Power Apps. This is not being enforced yet, and I can tell you, but likely will at some point. It's a bit nebulous about what a context means, but there's a lot of, you know, when you read the licensing guide, there's a lot of talk about the context of running Power Automate behind Power Apps. When you need tenant, you know, if you need to use this RPA functionality, is only if you are leveraging the new robotic process automation flow that use UI flow. And again, RPA has two models of licensing: a tenant. A tenant means that it's actually it's running on someone's computer. Unattended means it's running in the cloud in the background, right? And the per tenant RPA is, for instance, to build a flow that replaces you doing your job of clicking here all day long, right? And that's really what the Power Automate attended RPA flow is. Great opportunity here to automate single people processes of going from this system here and this system here. You connect the two with attended RPA as well. Now, I think April mentioned a very important point, right? We've seen a lot of clients struggling with, you know, we've got this Power Automate flow. We need to use a SQL connector. It's expensive, right? You know, it starts at 500 is the minimum to license per flow. Well, don't forget that Azure Logic Apps is a close equivalent to Power Automate. As a matter of fact, I think Power Automate is a subset of Logic Apps, right? And Logic Apps is licensed on a per consumption basis. And if you have a flow that's running once a day, you can export it from Power Automate, load it in Logic Apps. It's going to do the same thing. The UI is a bit different. You have to be in Azure now, so it requires a bit of training, but it's going to run at a fraction of the cost because it's only going to consume when it's being run, right? So if you have a flow that runs once a week, once a month, you don't need to license a big thing. You can put it in Logic Apps. We've seen many scenarios of that. When Microsoft changed the licensing, we moved a lot of people from Power Apps to Logic Apps because, you know, it ended up being $20, $30 a year, right? So it wasn't a big thing. So always keep that in the back of your mind. Now, virtual agent, again, sometimes when I talk about licensing, I always wish it was consistent, but it's not. There is no seated version of Power Virtual Agent in Office 365, except if you are using it inside of Teams. There are two licensing editions. Power Virtual Agent for Teams, we mentioned that that's included, but it's limited capacity, 2,000 sessions per tenant per month. Per tenant is important, which means it's not per Teams, right? So if you have a virtual agent, that's limited, right? That's just to start and not doing much with it. You can up that capacity by going back to the Power Virtual Agent capacity pricing, which allows you to create and maintain internal or externally facing bots, and the starting point is $1,000 per month for 2,000 sessions. Now, there's a caveat of what means a session is. It's not just every time you open the bots, has a lifespan, I think, of 24 hours. So, you know, don't think it's only 2,000 interaction per month. It's more than that. Next is our AI Builder. That again is a great capability. It comes seeded with a few systems. It's seeded with Dynamics. It's seeded with attended RPA. And it's a great way to extend your Power Apps or your flow. And it can be purchased several different ways. If you use SharePoint Syntax, which is a new capability, it gets credit for AI Builder. If you use Power Automate with attended RPA, you get 5,000 service credit. If you use Dynamics, certain Dynamics 365 license, it is included, you get credit. Otherwise, it's $500 a month to get 1 million, I think 1 million or 1,000. I don't know, I have to check that, that's important. But a bucket of service credit. So how about Dataverse? Well, that's interesting. There's no licensing for Dataverse standalone. So if you want to use a cloud database, you have to do it for Power Apps, right? That's your way into licensing Dataverse, or Power Apps Portal, or Canvas or Model Driven. One of those will give you that. At the exception of Dataverse for Teams, which you get the Dataverse Lite. So Microsoft introduced this concept of Dataverse Pro, which is essentially what's not in the Dataverse for Teams. And Dataverse Pro is licensed as part of Power Apps on a per app per user. It's licensed as part of Dynamics. And by the way, there are other Microsoft product, cloud product that gives you automatically Dataverse. We know Microsoft Project Server. April, I just discovered that the other day. Also give you capacity. Didn't know about that, but if you use Microsoft Project Online, plan 2 or 3, you'll get capacity for Dataverse as well.
Yeah, it's relatively new-ish that you got that with Project. Yeah, it's pretty cool and hidden feature there.
How about Dynamics? Hey, if you are a Dynamics user, here's the good news. Most of Power Apps and Power Automate and some of the portal gets automatically licensed by having Dynamics 365. You get what's called user rights, which means you can potentially build complex application without the need to purchase additional licenses and even deploy a portal. And here's the footnotes. As long as the application are created within the context of the Dynamics application. So what that means, if I read that correctly, again, this concept of context is really hard to understand. If you have a CRM system and you need to build something like a customer survey application, right? That's a good example. And that customer survey application is about surveying opportunity or cases in the case of a customer service, and it's in the same environment as Dynamics, then you don't need to license that separately. And it could be a Canvas app, a Power Automate, a Power Apps Model Driven. It's all included, right? Now, again, probably impossible for Microsoft to enforce that it's the same context and the same principle, but that's important to know that it has to be within the context of the Dynamics application, right? You can create a separate environment that will require separate Dynamics licenses as well. Again, all of that licensing came over the last 10 months, right? I think it was in June of last year that things started changing. All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to leave some minutes for questions, but let me take you through some example. So example 1, we're going to talk about dashboards. Example 2, we're going to think about a large-scale application. And 3, how do you license things for application you build for teams? So Power BI says pretty straightforward. If you have a dashboard for 450 users, it's going to cost you roughly about $4,500 a month. And if you have 1,000 users, you're going to go premium, and you're going to be roughly about $5,000 a month, right? So pretty straightforward. There's an additional, I mentioned Power BI licenses called the embed license. Embedded means that if you're building custom application that use Power BI, you can use that Power BI embed capability that's coming out of Azure, by the way, to embed into your application. And the price is similar to the Power BI Premium. I think there's an option that starts in the $1,000 as well to embed. So again, exciting ability. There's a lot of ISVs that have built commercial apps that use Power BI and embedded that into their application as well. So here's a second use case. Let's say, for instance, that you're a large organization with thousands of people, and you have about 500 people at your headquarters, 300 people in your warehouse, and 1,000 sales managers, right? And you want to build an app that end-to-end talks and go together to build this. So here's how it's going to do. The app you're going to build first is the coaching app. That's an app that we use to coach your sales manager, right? And we're going to, probably use SharePoint for that, right? And you can see here, it's a nice looking app, right? It looks nice. It's a canvas. You need some good canvas skills to get there, but a nice app here. And that you're going to license it using the seeded Office 365, right? No cost and lots of people using it. Then we go into the warehouse. Now the warehouse, it's a more transactional system. So you're probably going to use the canvas, not the canvas. You're going to use the model-driven apps, right? You need a database, right, with tables and fields and relationship, etc. And then because you want to limit your internal work, you're going to have a supplier portal, right? And the way you're going to license that is on a per app passes. Passes mean the people in the warehouse will get a license as they use the app. You'll use the PowerApps portal for login for the external supplier. You get about 300 logins per month out of the box. You may need more logins, and you can buy a pack of login. And then this app will use the object detection capability to automatically detect an item and send it to the right place. So you need some AI credits for using the AI builder. So that's, again, and you can use on-premise data source and build a really, really nice app. And then your employee, your HQ, I had 500 here, so but not on this slide, but let's say you have 500 or 5,000 HQ employee. Those will need a lot of apps, right? Those will use an HR app, an auditing apps, an operation app, an IT help desk apps, right? In this case, they're using more than 2 apps, so you should license those user on a per user license basis as well. So again, to summarize that, different apps in your organization, some are free, some are on a per app basis, some will be on a per user basis. The whole purpose of that exercise to say you can mix and match. You can mix and match as well. And nothing will prevent you to create a Office 365 SharePoint-based app that use logic apps to push data to Dataverse and then have a few people internally, right? So you can be very creative to work around some of those licensing needs and sort of lower your monthly cost as well. So there's a great ways to do that as well. Next, and last use case, and then we'll get to some question as well. Dataverse for Teams. We're super excited about this capability, right? Because now you're able to take the power of the Dataverse cloud database and build application in the Microsoft Teams platform. This was released in October, April, or somewhere. No, not long ago, right?
October, November. I think it went just for everyone available access. Yeah, just end of October or
Right.
November. I'm sorry.
So this brings tremendous amount of use case. We're seeing a lot of clients being very creative. Microsoft has released, I think now 5 or 6 template apps. You have an inspection application, an issue management application, an idea management application. That's what we are on the screen here. A built-in application, a FAQ application. Again, they all use databases in the background, Dataverse with relationship model, Canvas on the front end. And they get deployed in teams. And again, because they're in teams, it means desktop, it means phone and tablet, and many devices as well. No cost. This is included as part of every Office 365 paid plans as well.
And it's important to note with that too. So you can use this lightweight Dataverse database for that, and you can even consume Azure API management APIs at no additional cost if you're building within Dataverse for Teams also. And they also released the functionality where you can share these Dataverse for Teams apps with people beyond the team. So when it was first released, you built it within a specific team and only people that were members or owners of that teams could use it. Now you can share that beyond so that you can create an application in PowerApps with Dataverse for Teams that you can share with your entire organization. So it just keeps getting even more powerful.
Great point, and I did forget about the API management that was new, and the sharing. And think about the API management. We recently built an app that needed to query the ticker of a stock in the stock exchange, and there's public APIs for that. And we created an API management, connected in PowerApps, and when someone typed the ticker, it resolve and give you the name, right? So very powerful. That has no cost, right? You have to pay for the API management, but that's a very minimal cost. All right, so here's the key takeaway, and then we'll address some question. The Power Platform has a great deal of capability, great deal of benefits, and it truly allows your organization to become agile, to implement agile business processes, and gain insight into your data as well. Bear in mind that licensing is complex. If you do, my big recommendation, if you start something, solve your licensing challenges first. Don't build the app and then face frustration because you now have to spend more money than you expected. And that's really was the intent of this webinar today. Some licenses restriction are not yet enforced, right? So you may think you're okay now, doesn't mean you'll be okay in the future, right? So again, make sure you understand that. Of course, we'll be here to help. You'll get a recording, a copy of this recording. We'll publish it shortly. We publish a blog post about this that has a lot of reference to the Microsoft terminology. And of course, book a meeting with us. There's a link here. We'll send you a link. We're happy to take your use case, drill down more into the complexity of this, and give you some insight on licensing as well. So I think we have a few minutes for question, April.
Yeah, we have quite a few. Someone asked, you mentioned app passes before. What do you mean about app passes?
So an app pass is, the app pass is a mechanism to get a license. Again, in the world of Office 365, you physically assign a license to a person. In the case of Power Apps, you get that license as you use the app. So let's say that you have 300 users, you bought 200 licenses, you put a pool of licenses, the first 200 people would be able to get in the app, and then it's going to stop and say, hey, you exceeded your licenses. So either you have to remove people and remove their licenses, and then other people would be able to log in, or you have to buy more passes. Just an easier way, so you don't have to constantly assign things as people use the app.
Yep, great. Okay, so another one here, and this one's kind of interesting. Do you think that eventually Dataverse for Teams will end up being split out and charged separately?
No. And the reason why I say no is they're already thinking about a way to upgrade, right? So the idea will be that, they want to give you a taste, build apps, bring your apps into Teams, but then what's likely going to happen, you're going to start exceeding the capacity or needing more, right? Maybe the 2 GB is not enough. You need a 50 GB, right? Maybe the limit of $2 million, 2 million records per table is not enough. You need more. So soon Microsoft will give you the ability to upsize Lite to Pro. Of course, at that point you'll have to pay, but no,
Yeah.
they're not going to take it away.
So that's a good segue then, and kind of answers the next question of what's the main difference between this Dataverse Lite and Dataverse Pro? So probably, you know, as you mentioned, capacity, right? And how
Capacity.
much you get,
Features
offline
and
mode.
capacity.
Yeah.
Features
Yeah,
and
different.
capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's pretty much it. Okay.
there's a great page, and we'll make sure to send you that link as well that compare the two.
Cool. All right, 2 more questions here. If I build an app in Dataverse and wish to run it outside of Teams, do I need a per app license?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the answer to that is yes. And then last one here, HTTP connector comes in premium category or is it standard?
Well, that's one of the changes that happened a year and a half ago that upsetted a lot of people. The HTTP connector is premium. And if, again, that is why many people are moving those flow to logic apps, right? Because the other flow that was calling an HTTP connector and only is being used once a day or twice a day, you know, it will cost you 5 cents a run, or a fraction of a cent for each run. Move that to logic apps. If you need an HTTP connector inside of Teams, if you use the API management in Teams, it is included. If you use it in Canvas outside of Teams, any HTTP connection is premium. So is SQL and Dynamics and Azure. All right. I think we covered all the questions, and it's up 12 p.m. here in the eastern side of the United States. Again, April, it was a pleasure to have you on this webinar today. Thanks everyone for joining, and feel free to reach out to us with any questions. You can find us on Twitter or book a meeting at the link here. Thank you again.
Thanks.